Today, everyone is talking about the upcoming elections, the latest political scandal in Washington, or what the Federal Reserve might do with interest rates next month. But they are entirely missing the most important question, a question that will decide the future of your wallet, your retirement, and the American way of life. The question is not who sits in the Oval Office. The question is, can America survive when the rest of the world completely stops using its money? I am Professor Jiang Miller. Today we are going to look at the BRICS alliance. We are going to look at their quiet, calculated war on the US dollar. And I am going to explain exactly how this trap is closing, step by step, in plain, simple English. Part 1. The Illusion of Normalcy and the 1974 Secret. Right now, you go to the store, you buy groceries, you pay your mortgage, and everything feels normal. Expensive, but normal. You assume the US dollar will always be the most powerful currency on earth. Why? Because it has been that way for your entire life. But this is an illusion. The power of the US dollar does not come from American factories anymore. We shipped those overseas decades ago. It does not come from American gold. The power of the US dollar comes from a single invisible rule. The rest of the world is forced to use it. To understand the trap we are in today, you have to understand a secret agreement made in 1974. Back then, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia. America promised to protect the Saudi royal family with the full force of the US military. In exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed to do one very specific thing. They would only sell their oil in US dollars, not in pounds, not in yen, not in gold. Only dollars. This created the petrodollar system. If Japan wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they cannot pay in Japanese yen. They have to change their yen into US dollars first and then buy the oil. It created an artificial, endless global demand for American money. This is the invisible shield that protects the US economy. Because every country on earth needs dollars to keep their lights on and their cars running, America can print trillions of dollars out of thin air. We can run a $39 trillion national debt, and we can export our inflation to other countries. The world absorbs our debt because they have no other choice. But this shield is cracking, and the mainstream media is completely ignoring the sound of the glass breaking. Part 2. The trap nobody sees. This brings us to the BRICS alliance. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And recently, they expanded. They added the heavyweights of the Middle East, including the United Arab Emirates, and most importantly, Saudi Arabia. This is what the media is not telling you. They treat BRICS like a simple political club, a group of foreign leaders taking photos together at a summit. It is not. BRICS is a financial weapon. It was built with one specific goal: to bypass the US dollar entirely and destroy Washington's ability to control the global economy. For years, Washington has used the dollar as a stick. If a country disobeys the United States, Washington simply cuts them off from the SWIFT international payment system. They freeze their dollar reserves. They did this to Iran. They did it to Venezuela. And recently, they did it to Russia, freezing over $300 billion of Russian central bank assets overnight. Washington thought this would crush the Russian economy and serve as a warning to the world. But it did the exact opposite. The BRICS nations watched this happen. India watched, China watched, Saudi Arabia watched, and they realized a terrifying truth. If America can freeze Russia's money today, they can freeze our money tomorrow. The US dollar was no longer a safe asset. It was a weapon pointed at their heads. So they started building a trap. A parallel financial system. A system like Project M-Bridge, which allows central banks to trade directly with each other using digital currencies. A system that does not touch American banks, does not use American servers, and most importantly, does not require a single US dollar. Part 3. The fatal domino effect. Now I want you to pay close attention because this is the exact sequence of events that will trigger the collapse. It is a chain reaction. Once it starts, it cannot be stopped by any president or any general. Step 1. The end of the 1974 agreement. Saudi Arabia has already stated they are open to selling oil in Chinese yuan and other local currencies. They are no longer exclusively tied to the dollar. When the world's largest oil exporter stops demanding dollars, the foundation of the US economy crumbles. Step 2. If the world does not need dollars to buy oil, global demand for the US dollar drops immediately. Central banks across the globe will realize they are holding trillions of dollars they no longer need. Step 3. Because they do not need dollars, foreign nations will stop buying US Treasury bonds. Right now, foreign countries finance the American government. They lend us money so we can keep spending. But if they stop buying our debt, they will start dumping the American bonds they currently hold. Step 4. If foreign countries stop buying US debt, the American government hits a wall. Washington has a massive $39 trillion deficit. If no one wants to buy that debt, the interest rates on US Treasury bonds will have to skyrocket to attract buyers. Step 5. This is where it hits your wallet. When Treasury yields skyrocket, everything else follows. Mortgage rates will not be at 7 or 8%. They will shoot to 12, 15, maybe 18%. The housing market will freeze instantly. Credit card interest rates will become unpayable. Thousands of businesses that rely on cheap loans will declare bankruptcy, causing massive unemployment. Step 6. The final domino. To prevent a total collapse of the government, the Federal Reserve will have only one option left. They will be forced to print massive amounts of new money just to pay the interest on the national debt and buy their own bonds. This massive printing will cause the value of the dollar to plummet. The inflation you saw over the last few years was just a small preview. We are talking about hyperinflation. The cost of fuel, food, and basic goods in the United States will double and then triple. Your savings, your 401k, your pension, the numerical value might stay the same, but the purchasing power will be wiped out. If Saudi Arabia flips, the petrodollar dies. If the petrodollar dies, the debt cannot be funded. If the debt cannot be funded, the Fed prints trillions. And if the Fed prints trillions, your savings are destroyed. This is the mathematical reality of the trap. Part 4. The Golden Lifeboat. And here is another piece of the puzzle that nobody is talking about. While the American public is distracted by domestic politics, what are the central banks of the BRICS nations actually doing with their money? They are buying gold. Over the last 2 years, central banks in China, India, and across the global south have purchased more physical gold than at any time in recorded history. They are not buying American debt anymore. They are taking physical delivery of thousands of tons of gold and storing it in their own vaults. Why? Because gold is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability. Washington cannot freeze a bar of gold sitting in a vault in Beijing or Riyadh. The BRICS nations are building a lifeboat backed by physical commodities, and they are preparing to let the debt-based American ship sink. Part 5. The Echo of History. People think a superpower cannot fall quickly. They think the American empire is permanent. But history tells us a very different, very brutal story. Look at the British Empire. Before World War II, the British pound was the absolute global reserve currency. London controlled the international financial system. But the debt from 2 world wars crushed their economy. The turning point was the Suez Crisis in 1956. The world suddenly realized Britain no longer had the financial or military power to enforce its will. The transition was not slow, it was violent. By the 1960s, the world had lost faith in the pound. The British public suffered severe austerity, massive inflation, and a permanent drop in their standard of living. The empire collapsed not just from military exhaustion, but from financial irrelevance. America is walking down the exact same path. In 1971, President Richard Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard. Since that day, the dollar has been backed by nothing but trust and military projection. But the BRICS nations no longer trust Washington, and after watching the chaotic exits from recent conflicts, they are no longer afraid of the US military. The war on the dollar has already been declared. It is not being fought with missiles, tanks, or aircraft carriers. It is being fought in central banks, in gold markets, and in energy contracts in the Middle East. The mainstream media will keep distracting you with local politics and celebrity gossip until the very last moment, when you go to the ATM and realize your money buys half of what it did yesterday. The goal of this analysis is not to cause panic. Panic is what happens when you are caught by surprise. Panic is for the uninformed. The goal here is to help you see the chessboard clearly. You must understand that the American way of life, built on cheap debt and the artificial power of the dollar, is coming to an end. You need to prepare your finances. You need to understand hard assets. And you need to watch what the BRICS nations are doing, not what politicians in Washington are saying. If you want to understand the real truth behind the headlines, and if you want clear, simple breakdowns of the events shaping our global economy, subscribe to the channel right now. And I want to ask you a question. Out of all the BRICS nations, which country do you believe poses the single biggest threat to the American economy today? Is it China, Russia, or perhaps Saudi Arabia? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next breakdown.